Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Weber. We're recording Better for America's podcast live here in Orlando, Florida, with Donald Trump Jr. What an honor it is to have you with us today.
It's a pleasure. Good to be here.
Really, really great. You really don't need an introduction, but I do want to say it is my distinct pleasure to have you with us. You are a national voice. You're a proven leader. You are a committed conservative, and you're someone that we all know. You're a friend of AMAC, and we are just honored. And I know that you don't really need an introduction, but some people may not know that you are a proven innovator and a job creator. You're currently the executive vice president of the the Trump Organization, and you really understand free markets. You understand business, and you understand business operations, business marketing, construction, and you really understand that business is part of what makes America so great, the private sector. And so there's so much that really we could talk about, but I really want to focus on the fact that you're such a defender of our freedoms and a defender of our individual liberties. You have a degree in finance and real estate. You're the proud father of 5 children. You're an outdoorsman. We love that.
I know how that happens now, by the way.
You learned
got a new hobby. I do more of the outdoor stuff now. So
that's right. And our members, you know, when we were here in 2018, our last conference, our members really supported your father. They were chanting Donald J. Trump over and over again at that conference. And so I want to jump into a question really that speaks to where we're at today. What a different world compared to 2018 when everyone was chanting Donald J. Trump. America was really on such a great path, and we saw a booming economy. And today we're really feeling what I call like a profound regret, right? Because so many of us are saying, how did we get here? My goodness, people really can't remember a time that's been so bad, a time like today when you look at all that's happening. And I'm a big believer in hope, and I do think that we have a lot of good things to look forward to, but when you look at where we're at today, what would you say is some of the greatest challenges that we're facing, and what do you think is going to drive people to the voting box in November?
Hopefully competence, and there seems to be a great shortage of competence out there. I mean, I think we went from chanting Donald J. Trump to let's go Brandon. There's a distinct difference, but you know, they hold quite true, right? Trump delivered on all the promises that he said he was going to deliver on. He fixed the economy, he ended endless wars, he created peace deals in the Middle East. I mean, now we seem to be regressing, you know, on the brink of a world war. There's a baby formula shortage in America. I mean, think of the insanity of what's happened. Fuel prices hitting $6-7 in some places, going up with no end in sight. It's actually a truly scary place to be. And I know you want to be optimistic, but it's hard right now. Now, maybe the optimism that I see is in that finally, you know, the veil's been lifted up on the Democrats, right? For years, they had a $1 trillion mainstream media complex functioning as their marketing department. They still do. You know, $1 trillion big tech enterprise doing the same thing, protecting them from their insanity, making sure that people don't see what their policies are really about. You see that as it relates to sort of this week, as it relates to the abortion issue, right? Now it's not just, you know, the day after. Now it's, you know, well, the baby can be born, and now it's, you know, 7 days later in California, and in 2 months it'll be, I don't really like my toddler. It's so ridiculous and so extreme right now that the left is finally exposing themselves to people perhaps who aren't like us, meaning they're not watching this stuff day in and day out, hours and hours a day. They're busy feeding their families. They're listening to it in the background. So they assume what they hear from the press or the news, that there's some semblance of the truth there. I think the biggest thing I've learned in the last 6 years, having been in the room, is that there doesn't have to be any semblance of truth. Nothing has to have happened to drive that narrative. And so, again, I think it's gotten so bad that people are seeing through it. Racism is the answer to everything because you would disagree on socioeconomic policy. The easy button of the political left. I think so much of it has been exposed as of late that maybe you needed that much of an extreme pendulum shift for people to wake up and actually see what's going on in their country.
Yeah, it's really amazing when we're hearing about people who are abandoning their party altogether because they're seeing exactly what you're describing. It's really unrecognizable, some of the policies that we're seeing. And we're seeing this like really unprecedented government overreach and intrusion, overspending. And what's weird is we have a president who's saying that his spending policies have no impact on inflation. So I don't know who he thinks he's talking to, but I think we're smarter than that.
Well, but again, with the media, you saw that with the new press secretary, right? She got up, she was asked the very simple question: how does that extreme taxation, how does it solve inflation when you have sort of rampant Democrat spending? They're printing money. They're sending $40 billion to Ukraine for a non-NATO ally, another country that's rated almost, if not in some cases worse in terms of the corruption level, of this, and it's just a kickback to big war. It's been all of 3 months since we've been in a big war. The military-industrial complex has been watching big pharma at the trough for the last 2 years, and they're saying it's their turn, and this is just a kickback to them. But you see that. You saw that with the press secretary's response. It was like a Kamala Harris response, right? Like just sort of a lot of words, no meaning. With togetherness, we can together be together, to move forward together, to further our togetherness together. Like, doesn't mean anything. But, they made a really big deal that she checked off a couple boxes, I guess being, a female, immigrant, African-American, gay person in the press secretary's box. Competence does not have to factor in as long as you can check off boxes. The more boxes you can check off, the less competence you need to sit in these roles. And it just doesn't feel like we're on a good track for those kinds of things. But again, you see the responses and you realize that there's no semblance of reality, there's no semblance of truth, and it doesn't matter because they're so used to the media just running cover for them.
That's right.
Now it's gotten so bad, when people are, I'm the son of a billionaire from New York City. When I'm filling up my truck and I'm pissed off, I get it's not really going to change my day, but if I'm still be like, damn,
right.
That stings. That's a lot more. That's a lot more than I've ever paid. If I can think about how that must feel to the average American family, I mean, these guys can be so clueless and so far removed from even caring, let alone attempting to do anything about it. I mean, don't forget, they understand we have some energy needs, so they'll negotiate with Venezuela, a regime they didn't recognize. They're negotiating with Iran, the world's leading state sponsor of terror, but, they won't talk to like people in, Texas.
Yeah.
That have it in the ground right there that could be produced by them, creating jobs, creating national security, doing it in a more environmentally friendly, because the regulations here, I assure you, are worse than they're going to be in Iran or Venezuela or Russia, other places where we're
exporting pollution, we're exporting things that we could be doing right here in America. And my 100%. Mother would always say to me, she'd say, Rebecca, maybe I don't have to worry about paying a few dollars more for a gallon of gas, but I worry about my children. I worry about my grandchildren. Yeah. She said, I worry about the future of America and the fact that you and your father and your family recognize that not everybody is in a position to spend a few dollars more or $50 more at the pump. That's the difference between medication, food on the table, taking a vacation. It really impacts everyday Americans.
It's going to go beyond that. Candidly, right now, with those kind of costs increasing, everyone bought their homes in the last, decade at all-time low interest rates. Those are creeping up, and I'm sure everyone's enjoying their 8.5% pay cut right now due to inflation. And anyone who's actually, again, another thing that I see that I probably shouldn't, but if I'm noticing it, whether it's, at the store, whether it's at the pump, for the average American, the things that they actually use in their day-to-day lives, it ain't 8.5%. It's probably like 25%.
Yeah.
In terms of real cost increases. You factor those two things together, and it's a serious problem. And they're totally oblivious to it. And if they're not oblivious to it, they're not handling it, even addressing it. And if they're not addressing it, you have to wonder, is it intentional at this point? We understand the energy side is because they're trying to push green vehicles. The problem is we don't create enough energy to charge all the green vehicles if everyone in America had one, right? They live in some
La
sort
La
of
Land.
dream world that doesn't
right.
actually exist.
They don't want us to think that 1 + 1 = 2, and we're not going to let them get away with it. I think Americans are really waking up to the idea that it's the American people that make this nation great, not the government. It's it's Americans that make the nation so great. So that's really great. I do want to talk to you about our First Amendment right, and I do want you to talk a little bit about Truth Social.
Yeah.
I'm a member. We love that platform. But the left, again, they really, really lost their minds. We say here at AMAC that they have a rule or ruin approach. If they cannot rule their way, they want to ruin America for the rest of us. And so when we look at Biden's Ministry of Truth, his Disinformation Governance Board, which is currently on hold. But we recognize that it's the left with the misinformation and disinformation. I have a list here. Hunter Biden's laptop is real. They lied
Imagine it was Don Jr. like, I don't know, there's like 175 things on there. If I did one of them, I'd be in jail, it'd be all over, it would be totally disqualifying to my father. And it's like, these things are real. I mean, the money from China, the money from Russia, links to human trafficking, minor things like crack. I have a feeling they wouldn't give me the same benefit of the doubt if I was, snorting the old Parmesan as a hunter. So we see that, and you see it in the last week as it relates to everything with Twitter. Right? And I know because I'm on there with a big following. I see what my engagement now versus 10 years ago before we got overtly political, even though I've always been conservative, it's a fraction of that. Then when Elon Musk tries to even the notion of a level playing field for free speech, you see them, they're losing their minds.
They really are.
They're losing their minds. So, my father went out and, he created Truth Social to be able to create a platform for this. And again, if, when the Twitter thing falls through, which it probably will because they've weaponized they're going after him with the SEC now and they're doing all these other attacks. They've weaponized the entire highest branches of government against, not just a billionaire like Elon Musk, but all of you. Who here isn't a concerned parent or a grandparent that maybe doesn't love what's going on in their school curriculums? Like, you've literally been labeled a domestic terrorist, not by the lunatic fringe, but by our DOJ and the FBI. It's crazy. It's hard to believe. Sometimes I wake up, wondering if I'm in the Truman Show, just being like, am I being punked? Like, I'm waiting for Ashton Kutcher to jump out of a cake and be like, yeah, we're just kidding with you. Like, no one's this stupid. It can't be real. And yet, every day it gets worse and worse. But just the notion of having a level playing field. I know the day they announced that, obviously they started, they were burning the records at Twitter. The next day, after being stagnant for 3 years, essentially, I got 87,000 new followers. The next day after that, 119,000. The next day after that, 127,000. The next day after that, another 100 something. It's almost 750,000 people in 2 weeks. Where it was nothing because they were just, hey, we got it, whatever we're doing to the algorithm to screw that up. So you had about 2 or 3 days of proper engagement, and once they realized that, that the platform is mostly bots and mostly nonsense, they figure that's the way they'll get him out of the deal, and they'll go back to controlling it with an iron fist. It's truly scary. Again, it's why my father created Truth, to create a platform that's out there. Me and some friends created MXM News. Basically an app that just aggregates all the news that you won't see on those platforms because their algorithms will hide the Durham report information from you. They'll hunt the Hunter Biden laptop. You'll just never see it. It's out there. The news is being reported at times. It's just a question of what gets distributed and what's actually seen. And when you're working again with big tech functioning as the marketing arm of the radical left, it's very hard to overcome. So we've had to do that. And for years, they say, build your own, do your own, and the second someone does, well, then they attack you. They throw you off Amazon Web Services or one of the other things. So it's not as simple. It's a wonderful soundbite. Well, if you don't like it, do your own. But they don't just let you do your own either.
They don't let you do your own. And it seems to me that the left really wants to shut down entirely political discourse, any type of conversation, and wants to use the federal government to really target conservative speech. That's what I think a lot of people are seeing and recognizing. And so we have to wonder, they're taking a pause now, right? Because they're saying there's too much.
No, it's already getting back to the old ways. They're going to continue doing that. They've done that forever. It's free speech for them, but not for us. No one. I'm sure you've all seen some really vile things said and thought and put on social by the other side. No one's ever been thrown off. No one's ever been deplatformed. No one's ever been demonetized. Just talking basic Judeo-Christian conservative thought these days is labeled hate speech. I mean, you've seen the stuff, you've seen the people thrown off the platforms. Nothing radical. I've seen it in, we're talking even publishing. Yeah. The conservative imprint of some of these publishing houses. Why we started a publishing house ourselves. The conservative imprint of some of these publishing houses are being run by radical leftists. So I've been there in the room where guys that are best-selling authors are, they get the call from their publisher. Yeah, if you say that, we can't. We're going to pull your book.
Yeah.
We won't publish it. We won't. And this, again, it's not like it's radical thought. It's basic, mainstream conservatism. But that's too far for them. So they've done a very good job of getting in there, controlling all those aspects, and doing so under the guise of free speech. But it's not. I mean, what we've done wrong on the conservative side is for the last half century, we've turned the other cheek. We've let them take the win. We pretend we're standing on some sort of higher ground principle, but meanwhile they're laughing their butts off each and every time, taking the win and controlling all of these systems that's going to destroy our country and our future and the world we want to leave our children.
So let me ask you, do you think that this is a very small number of represents a smaller group in America that has the loudest voice right now, and the silent majority is going to be able to turn things around? Do you believe that if we can elect conservatives and Republicans in office, that this is sort of a temporary thing that America is experiencing? Or do you think that left and what we're seeing in America is a greater, something bigger that needs to be?
Well, no, I think it's a much bigger issue than, when you talk about sort of the progressives, everyone's like, well, there's like 4 or 5 of them. I'm like, no, there's like 96 of them. It's a majority of that caucus, right? You can't be an elected national figure essentially at this point anymore on the left without being a radical. There's still moderate Democrats in America. They're just not running for office because they can't get it. They can't get the California money that's getting them into office, the New York money that's getting them elected, all of that out-of-state money. That's that's the engine for so much of the, let's call it, success that they've had in some cases. So I do think there's sort of a moderate electorate, and they're looking at it. And Elon Musk may be one of them, right? Where he's like, well, I voted Democrat because maybe I thought they were the party of kindness, but they're not really the party of kindness. They never were. They just have been really good at marketing and pretending, right? Just like the tolerance they preach all the time. There's no tolerance. There's only a tolerance if you toe the line 100% with you. You see, they eat their own if you go, 99% of where they need to be, which would be a pretty reasonable sort of split in politics to not agree on 100% of the talking points, and they'll destroy those people just as readily as they would a conservative. The tolerance is nonsense. People believed they were the kind party or the party of tolerance only because they had, again, those trillion-dollar systems sort of backing them up and making it seem as though it's real, where it was always one big optical illusion.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the ultra MAGA kingmaker, your father. He has done an amazing job really endorsing people, and his endorsements, Americans are getting behind that. Look at what we're seeing. So can you tell us, clearly I think for most of us here, we're saying, no, he is the leader of the Republican Party. There's got to be a lot of fear from the left of a possible 2024 run. And tell us if I would be remiss if I didn't ask you what your opinion is. Do you think that we might see a Donald J. Trump ticket in 2024?
Well, I'd like to, primarily because the gains I think we've made as conservatives were only because finally we started fighting back. But why did we start fighting back? Because Donald Trump opened that door, right? It's not because of other people. Other people, are trying to emulate him right now, right? That you still see, sort of in the popularity polls in the Republican Party. It was someone last week. It was like my father. I was number 2. Ron DeSantis was like number 3. I shouldn't be in that list. Not that I'm not freaking wonderful, but I've not even really dipped my toe in that water, right? To be, yes. I'll go fight for this stuff because I believe in it. I can assure you it'd be much easier to sit on my butt and be a real estate developer from New York City and shut up and just mind my own business and keep printing money and doing that. That could be great, but it's not my style. Maybe I got too much of that other gene, but if that's the bench, well, what do I bring to that? People will look at me and be like, okay, he'll fight for us. We just need more people like that, and we don't have that. There's a lot of people that, they talk a big game to the small groups of conservative people, but then they get to DC, they get the call from the writer at the New York Times, and now they'll change their entire ethos just to turn an article that's going to be a 2 into a 3. It's going to be a disaster either way, but they're so afraid. So, I mean, the reason there's any Republicans even pushing back and fighting in the culture wars, and some of the things that we're doing and doing quite effectively right now to reasonable people is because Donald Trump allowed for that to happen. He's the guy that started it. And again, everyone can talk a big game, but when you're the guy and all those guns are fired on you, most if not all change. And so if it's going to be someone, I'd want it to be him until we can, again, create, more of a bench than, Donald Trump, his namesake son, and another governor. And again, that could be great. I'm not saying it, but I think you need more than that.
Yeah.
And for it to kind of be there and then drop off so rapidly, we have a lot more building to do as a party. Getting rid of a lot of the rhinos. You might as well have Democrats with some of the people we have representing us, and under the mantle of good conservative, and it's just not really real.
Yeah. In 2019, AMAC members voted Donald J. Trump as our Man of the Year, and I just want you to know that we are thankful to him. I speak on behalf of our 2.4 million members, and we pray for you, because I do think that there's a spiritual war out there, and many people would not be able to withstand the attacks and still come out and still be true to his word and stay focused. And so we're excited about that. I do want to turn the microphone to the crowd. We have a few people that have some questions, so we'll go ahead and take a couple of questions from the group. And we're just waiting for that to come, but this is really great. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Andy.
Somebody's got a question, right? To you? Somebody's got a question. All right.
I have a few more I can always add on.
Hi, my name's Craig. I saw a meme where it said that who controls the teleprompter is who's controlling this country. Would you care to care on that? Who is controlling the teleprompter?
I think that was obviously, I think that was Elon Musk actually in reference to Joe Biden. And, anyone who's been paying attention, maybe I'll incorporate it into my speech, shortly, but, you realize, this man has no idea where he is half the time, right? That's not it is what it is. We're all, hopefully get to that point in our lives, but we all, at that stage in our lives, wouldn't have the nuclear football. I mean, Joe Biden, half the time he doesn't remember where he is. He has a hard time walking upstairs, remembering the basic names of the people in his cabinet. That's a complicated process. I'm relatively new to this stuff. You'll see in my speech later on, I can get up there and speak for, half an hour with no notes, no teleprompter, and he can't even read the teleprompter and get it right at this point. It's scary. And you look at the policies. You say, there's no way that, Joe Biden, given the policies that he's had throughout, his career in, 197 years in Washington, D.C., he's not coming up with this stuff. Someone else is, but he's just sort of blindly signing it. And you can see that. And I think that's sort of been weaponized, where the radical, factions of that party understand they have someone who's going to sign the blank check for whatever policies that they are. I think Obama was probably equally radical. He was just smart enough to try to cover it up a little bit. Joe Biden, it's I'll sign it if you get me some ice cream. It's a little bit different. So but it's scary. And again, if you look at the policies that he's enacting and signing, they are the most radical in our history, and they don't jive with anything that he's ever done in his career. But that was part of it, right? In 2016. I didn't have to be a Politico to get people to hate Hillary Clinton. She does that on her own. It's very easy for me. It was like shooting fish in a barrel. Joe Biden, he's sort of this bumbling guy. He's not so bad, but probably ends up being far more dangerous because of that sort of lack of understanding of what's going on. I truly believe he has no idea what's going on most of the time, and I think that's totally been weaponized. And again, if you look at the results. I don't know that any reasonable person could come up with a conclusion other than they're literally trying to hurt our country, because you couldn't make this many bad decisions, assuming a lot of these decisions are sort of binary, yes, no, that you're going this direction, and every time, you don't flip the coin and get tails every time, right? It doesn't work that way. And yet they seem to be, which leads me to believe that it has to be intentional at this point.
And what I loved about President Trump was that he really did control the teleprompter. He was not afraid. You knew that when he was speaking from the heart. He was speaking with intention, and he wasn't going to let anybody stand in his way. And I think that's exactly what we need, especially during these times. Yeah. We're in unprecedented times for sure.
So my question is, in 2016, we had a spineless Congress that undermined President Trump's agenda. And right now we're looking at, potential red wave in November. At least that's where the winds seem to be blowing. How do we, as the grassroots, as we go and we try to get true conservative Republicans elected, how do we keep that from happening again? Because it seems like, I had a lot of hope in 2016, and they just there was no immigration reform, no healthcare reform. Yep. Policy after policy, you had Trump have to go through executive orders to get things done that he should have had support from a Republican Congress.
Again, it's about being vocal. We have to hold these guys accountable, right? It's sort of, when I look back at my father's record, it's actually sort of amazing he had as much success as he did when he wasn't just up against the Democrats and the media that hated him. He was up against the Republicans too that were, there's never been sort of accountability in Washington, D.C. If you get it wrong, it doesn't really matter. It's other people's money. Who really cares? If you're a weak sort of rhino Republican, it's actually an easy existence in D.C. The left leaves you alone. You can vote with the party 75% of the time, but they know when you fold, when it actually matters on issues that people in this room like myself and on issues that we care about, if they know you're an easy fold, you can actually be a Republican in D.C. and they'll leave you alone because you're a useful idiot for them. We need to stop electing those people. We need to get those guys out of office. I don't care if it's 75% of our party. We got to elect people that actually care about our country and will fight for the policies, not just do so in soundbite form only. And so you're going to see a lot of that. You see that in some of these primaries, and there's a lot of money being spent to make sure we can go back to the old ways because all the people that controlled that, they benefit from it, even if the rest of America suffers from it.
Okay, one more.
I wanted to say, first of all, thank you to you and your father and your family for everything you're doing to fight for the American people.
Thank you.
What more can we do? I find it very frustrating when you hear and you see all of the fraud that has come about and been shown about our elections, mm-hmm. and the fraudulent goings on, shenanigans as I call them, in just about every state it seems like, and there is the evidence is there and it's been proven, it's on video, and it seems like there's nothing being done. There's a lot of information that came out from the PCAP data from Mike Lindell and all of these, this other information from 2000 Mules, and it just seems like we're still here and nothing's moving forward.
Well, listen, I think that the problem with a lot of the gamesmanship that was done is like every state, it's not like there was sort of one universal thing that was used across the board, and I think the one thing we certainly don't want to do is federalize elections because I imagine it would get significantly worse there, but that's the issue. You have to look at it, state by state, hold the legislatures accountable, get people involved. I think what we've done typically, whether it's, we're busy working or otherwise, I think we just have to get involved at every level. Our education system became a disaster because, radical leftists, most of whom don't even have kids, got involved on their school boards so they could indoctrinate our children. We say, it's not really a job for us. That's sort of a thankless, crappy, we don't need to get involved in that. It'll be fine. Who would destroy our children's futures? Who would really do that? I understand why you'd be skeptical of it, but if you've been watching for the last few decades, you realize, wait a minute, there's much more. So, perhaps more importantly than a presidential or a gubernatorial elections or a Congress or a Senate, it would be like, get involved in your school board, get involved in your state legislature, make sure you're doing that, and make sure you're vocal again, because there's plenty of instances, that we've seen in the, on the issues that you're talking about where you're right, they were in violation of the state constitution, but a couple, even Republicans, I don't really want to rock the boat. The newspaper guy over there is going to write a mean article about me if I actually follow our Constitution and we don't make an exception for COVID that we've weaponized. we have to get out there and we have to have people that actually have some resolve, in those things. And so, it's not just about, getting, a Trump type person back in office or, your congressman or your senator. I mean, focus on those races as well. And we can all do a lot more within our communities and frankly, probably move the needle a lot more for our country and our future by not just sort of giving up on those things. And, again, for far too long we have, and that's how they've taken over, all aspects of academia and, hell, even at this point, even, law enforcement and the military's woke. And, I'll probably get into that in my speech later on. But, we've done that because we've sat back and sort of allowed it to happen. I think we got to play the same game that the other side's been playing, and we have not done that. We've played T-ball while they play hardball.
Yeah, and I have one last question for you before we wrap this up. You're the father of 5 children, and I'm the daughter of one of 5. I have 4 siblings, and as a mother, and you're a father, how do you? What is some advice that you give to us parents and grandparents as we try to raise children to honor and hold dear the wonderful values that America offers, the freedoms? We are the greatest nation on earth. Our children, I think, are sometimes sheltered a bit perhaps from the real world. Many of our children or grandchildren may be, but this is so crucial that future generations understand what's at stake. What advice might you give as a father?
Listen, it's obviously complicated, and everyone's different. I mean, I see it even with 5 kids. Everyone's sort of receptive to different stuff. I mean, it was sort of interesting. One of my kids is sort of just naturally just super conservative. Others are sort of figuring it out and questioning. But I think you got to talk to them and actually have those real conversations. I mean, my 9-year-old, when the Afghan withdrawal was going on, my 9-year-old, I mean, he's just young. Dad, I don't understand why we'd pull out the military before, our own citizens. Like, Dad, why were, I mean, he was asking real questions. And again, maybe it takes this sort of level of incompetence to get people actually paying attention, as opposed to, what's going on is just sort of noise in the background. So I'll listen, and I'll sort of take whatever that's being said as the gospel, as opposed to actually asking questions. But I think I think we actually have to start having these actual conversations with our children. Talk to them. What are they learning in school? Some of the sort of shadow curriculums that I hear about, that I've seen with my own eyes. It's truly scary stuff. So I think we just have to have much more dialogue, I think, with our kids, talking to them about what they're actually learning, what they're seeing, and trying to explain that it's not easy to be a young conservative. These days, you have a lot stacked against you. But I think for the ones that are, I always tell them, it's great that you're learning how to do this now, because I promise you the real world isn't going to be the rose-colored glasses that everyone's pretending it's going to be. And being able to sort of articulate these things, ask those questions, not just sort of, be the sheep that takes however ridiculous, the 97 genders. Oh, that's wonderful. It seems great. Totally legit. Totally, the party of science, right? And to be able, you can do so respectfully, but push back and have these conversations. But I think learning how to do that at a young age will be far more beneficial, I think, than, again, blindly following the nonsense that someone tells you and regurgitating it. And so, I think there's a lot of future for young conservatives. I've been helping a lot of the younger groups since we got into this process, whether it be Turning Point and some of our friends over there, and just, Charlie Kirk and those guys, and just, I think there's probably a lot more young conservatives out there, and I think when they're watching what's going on right now, that number's growing. There are still plenty that are a little bit silent because they've been sort of beaten into that corner for far too long. So I think we just got to create an environment where those people feel comfortable actually exercising their First Amendment rights, speaking about it, and being open about who and what they actually are.
Well, 2 of your greatest fans, and they absolutely love you. I think that they're here. Jacob and AJ Hall, are you here? These 2 young.
Look at that.
Yeah, these 2 young men right
What's happening,
here.
guys?
These 2 young guys. And they've got their hats on, and I've had a wonderful opportunity to sit and talk to them, and I swear I think these kids are smarter than a lot of adults are, because they get it. And so, but they love you, and they were excited to be here with you. So I thank you so much for this. We're so excited to have you with us upstairs. That's it for now. But this has been an honor, an absolute pleasure, really a dream for me to have this opportunity. Thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you.
And I hope that we get to talk again soon. And for all of you listening out there live, thank you so much for joining. I'm Rebecca Weber, and this is your podcast, Better for America. We look forward to having you back with us again next time. Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Better for America podcast, presented by AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. To learn more about AMAC and all it has to offer, visit us at www.amac.us.